Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this short session for 30 minutes. Tim Baker's my name. I want to talk about the trends that are occurring in HR, and I want to talk about them specifically in relation to my latest book, and that the book is The Future of Human Resources, Unlocking Human Potential. So I just want to give you a sense of what they are and so that you can start to give some thought around how it's impacting on your organization or business. And I'm going to go through 13 of these shifts, and I'll go through them obviously very quickly, bearing in mind we've only got 30 minutes together, and give you a sense of how they're evolving and what you need to do, whether you're in HR or whether you're a manager, whether you're a business owner, it doesn't really matter. All of these impacts will affect your business or your organization without a doubt. Or if you're an employee just curious about that, then obviously it has some impact on you as well. So at the end of this session, I'll be sending you a copy of the slides and the recording, so you'll get that. So you'll be able to go through it in some detail, but we're only online here for 30 minutes. So let's get underway. I'll share my screen and away we go. Okay, so a little bit about me, and I'm aware that some of you perhaps don't know who I am, but just give you a bit of a sense of who I am. I obviously, as you can see there, I write books, and I've got 14 books out, and my latest book, which has just been released last week, is The Future of Human Resources, Unlocking Human Potential. And of course, I'll go through that in a moment with you. You can also see that I give keynote addresses. I also run workshops. I'm an executive coach, and you can see I also play rugby in the Golden Oldies competition in Brisbane, and have done so for a number of years, which is a bit sad at my age, but never mind. So that's a little bit about me, and let's launch into some of the topics that we're going to cover today. Now, the first thing I want to sort of talk about here is that when people come to these sort of webinars or workshops, whatever it might be, there's often this kind of reaction of, here we go again, more crystal ball gazing. Now, what I want to do is just allay that fear. This is not crystal ball gazing. What I've actually done here is I've talked about some of the shifts that are occurring in human resources that have been going on for several years. So they won't be a complete shock to you, but nevertheless, I guess what I'm saying is that we need to accelerate our response to these shifts that are occurring in the world of work. So it's not like I'm giving predictions about what will happen in the future. What I'm doing is talking about what needs to happen in order to harness the future. And of course, we're talking about a post-COVID environment as well. So just to allay any concerns about me crystal ball gazing, I'm really talking about trends that are already in place. And I find that, you've basically got three different responses to these trends. On the one hand, people are not responding very quickly to them. On the other end of the spectrum, people are embracing these and doing something about it, but they are in a minority, I should say. Most of us are in the middle there. It's that transition between where we need to be and where we are. And people are aware of some of these trends and changes, but perhaps for various reasons aren't moving fast enough. So I really want to sort of, I guess my objective today is to give you a sense of what they are and to talk about what some of the things you might do in order to move you a little quicker towards where you need to be to respond to the post-COVID environment. Okay, so what are we covering? Well, basically, there are three things I want to cover in our short session this morning. I want to talk about the employee lifecycle model. So what I've actually done is I'm using the employee lifecycle, which is all the various stages that we all go through when we're an employee in an organization. And I want to use that to pretty much use it as a kind of a train track to be able to say what sort of things have to happen from the time you start in an organization to the time you finish in an organization. So it kind of makes it fairly simple that we've got this kind of a a process that we can talk about. I'm obviously going to talk about the 13 shifts that are important, and each of those shifts occur at different points along the employee lifecycle model. And at the end of this presentation, I've got a special offer for you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come along and have a listen to what we're saying here in relation to this particular topic. Now, the first thing I want to share with you is that now the concept of the employee life cycle is not a new concept. It's been around for several years. I think it's a great place to start because when a person comes into an organization, there are some predictable stages that they go through, and I'm not sure that these stages will change anytime soon. So obviously, if you're self-employed, then you wouldn't go through these stages. But I would imagine that most people in organizations would recognize these stages as they go through. So my employee life cycle starts at the recruitment and selection stage. And obviously, at that early stage, advertisements are out there. Basically, it's casting the net wide. We're bringing in ideal candidates for the position that might be vacant or newly created. And then we go through this rigorous selection process. We select a candidate, and that candidate then signs a contract. They become a new employee in the organization, or in fact, if they're internal, they may take that position. Now, once the employee, of course, starts work, virtually from day one, they're exposed to an induction and onboarding process. And fortunately, in the last 20 odd years, the induction process has improved enormously in organizations, but I'm challenging organizations to take it to the next level, and I'll come to that in a moment. Then, of course, once you're in an organization, you're given learning and development opportunities, and many of those learning and development opportunities are very much centered around what I might call the job-centered approach. So they're very much looking at helping you be more effective in the job that you are engaged or employed to do. But there's also, of course, as we know, personal development and problem-based learning. So we've got a whole bunch of learning opportunities that employees are exposed to when they join an organization. And throughout that process, of course, there are rewards and promotional opportunities, depending on, of course, the size of the organization. But, the rewards, of course, are the salaries and benefits that go with that. But the promotional opportunities are very real as well. And, there might be opportunities to advance to a leadership role, a management role, or a supervisory role, or whatever it might be. And then at the end of the process, that is at the end of the life cycle of an employee joining an organization, normally what happens is HR does an exit interview, and the exit interview is really often the last exposure that the employee has to the organization. And what they do at that point is hopefully give some frank and fearless advice to HR as to why they're really leaving, because often the reason that they're leaving is not the real reason that's given, but hopefully at that point, knowing full well that they're leaving, they might be honest about why they're leaving. And I think the old adage that people leave managers rather than organizations is very, very true. And then, of course, the employee departs and finds new employment somewhere else. And what happens, of course, is when they find another role, they go through this process again. So what I'm going to do is use this to talk about the 13 shifts that are required in HR. So each of these shifts have got something to do with each of these stages of the employee life cycle. Okay, so this is, of course, a table that comes out of my book, and what you're seeing here is that on the left-hand side are the various phases or stages. So we've got starting, developing, rewarding, and parting, which are really different words to what I've just gone through. So there's a starting phase, there's a developing phase, there's a rewarding phase, and there's a parting phase. Now, at each of these phases, you can see in the next column, which is the current process. This is where what we're generally currently doing. And then on the right-hand side is what I'm suggesting we should do in the future. So what you're seeing on the right-hand side is actually the shifts that are required. And so, in other words, it's to take a transition from the current to the future on these 13 shifts. So what I'll do now is I'll go through these 13 shifts with you and just give you a broad overview as to what they are, and talk a little bit about what needs to happen in order for you to move your organization towards the next step, which is critical for, unlocking human potential, as really the theme of my book is all about. So let's take shift 1. So when somebody starts, normally what happens is we interview people. We go through the interview process, and normally, as we know, it's a panel interview, and the best candidate, the one that's the most successful, wins the job. Nothing wrong with that process, except for the fact that the questions that we ask during the interview are, I think, slightly outdated, because what we tend to do there is we tend to ask people for past behaviour, evidence of past behaviour, thinking, of course, that past behaviour will demonstrate or illustrate future opportunities. So in other words, if someone's can give an example in an interview that they've dealt with conflict effectively, then it might be some sort of an indicator that they might be able to do that in their current job. Now, of course, that served us well for a long time, and I still think there's some need to do that. But the problem, of course, is that past behaviour may not necessarily predict future performance, in the sense that the world is changing so quickly that we need people to tap dance. We need people to be agile. We need people to be able to move and maneuver very quickly. And so if we are basing all of our interview questions on past performance, then we're probably missing a really important opportunity. So I think what we should be doing, as well as looking at past performance, because obviously there's some value in that, is we need to be looking at future potential. So in other words, a lot of our questions need to be geared towards what people's potential might be. Now, for example, we do know that one of the characteristics of a person that has a high future potential is their ability to be agile. Another one is curiosity. Another one is an ability to grow and develop. Now, these are sort of questions or concepts that we don't talk about at the interview. What we tend to do is to be looking at very fixed examples of people and how they're doing in their tasks. Now, the good news for you is that there are organisations out there now who have diagnostic tools that can actually assess future potential. And what we need to do is to make that paradigm shift from past behaviour to future potential. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to be very, very specific about making sure that we ask questions about future potential rather than past behaviour. And why am I suggesting that? Well, the truth of the matter is that what might be around in, say, 6 to 12 months might be completely different to what it is right now. And if we just start assuming that whatever someone's done in the past will be a predictor of the future may not be the same as the past. In fact, it's very likely it won't be. So therefore, we have to look at the capacity to be able to be flexible and maneuverable, to be able to continually learn and develop, and to, as I said earlier, tap dance. Shift number 2 is onboarding. Now, what we do is when we bring people on board, what we do is we try and indoctrinate them into the organisation. We train them how things are done around here. We give them systems and processes and all the rest. To some degree, that's still important. But I would also suggest that the next big phase is going to be what I call integration. And that is, we need to be able to learn from our new employees in the sense of what do they have to offer? What are their strengths and innate talents, and how can they be best harnessed in the new organisational environment? But the trouble we've got at the moment is it's too organisational centric. So we need another phase in there, which is about integration. And I've got another webinar that talks specifically about what you need to do to shift from onboarding to integration. Now, in terms of, this isn't necessarily about starting, but of course we now know because of COVID, it's accelerated the working from home, concept that's been around for many years. People now are spending more time working from home. So we need to maneuver from an on-site mindset to a hybrid working mindset. So we need to start thinking about that very carefully. So do we have the right HR systems? Do we have the right technology? How do we communicate with people who are working remotely? Some of them will continue to work remotely and very rarely, if ever, be in the office. So we've got to start thinking about the concept of hybrid working and not just think about it, because I'm sure we're aware of it, but we've also got to make sure our systems, processes, and procedures are well suited to the hybrid worker. Shift number 4 is the them and us has got to move to collaboration. We still have a them and us mindset in most organizations, management versus labor. And, you often hear people talking about them and us, and it's high time we just let that go and start working towards a more collaborative shared leadership model. And a lot of managers and leaders, and I do a lot of work with managers and leaders, have a hard time understanding this, that the future of the world of work is a collaborative environment, not a them and us environment. So all of those things have got some impact on the starting, and then we move into developing. Now, in terms of developing, you've got there, obviously, as I said earlier, people are exposed to a whole lot of training opportunities in the world of work. I'd suggest that about 80% of the training that people do is very much job related. In other words, it's about how to improve a person's job performance. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. I don't think 80% I think 80% is too high. But of course, you get a quick return on investment when you train somebody to be able to do a job better, faster, easier, with better quality, because it's a very tangible, that when you do training that's specific to a job, you can observe whether or not that job has actually been done better as a result of the training. And that's why it's so popular. But I would suggest now that there are 4 different types of learning and development that are critically important. And for HR, they've got to start thinking about this. There is job-centered training, obviously what I've just talked about, so that continues. We've got person-centered training, which ultimately means about personal development. It is about helping the individual develop themselves. And so indirectly, by developing themselves, they're going to develop themselves as an employee. Now, of course, we have programs in place for that. But the third one is problem-centered learning. How can we assist people to be better at making rapid decisions in situations where there isn't something written down in the manual? So this is, these are problems and issues that people face that are unique, and individuals are required to be able to think on their feet. And of course, as you and I both know, many people do not have this ability. So we actually have to have problem-centered learning. We have to have opportunities for that. And the fourth one, which is a big one now that's starting, is very much around, it's around technology-centered learning. So we've got to give people the tools and wherewithal to be able to deal with our digital environment. So I think HR needs to get a balance between those 4 centered approaches, and that's what I talk about in that chapter. Shift number 6, we need to move from a job-centered approach to a performance-centered approach. And what I'm suggesting there is we need to look at non-job roles, and we need to elevate them up into the job description. we need to consider, in fact, I would say 4. I think there are 4 critical non-job roles that are applicable to your business, my business, and everybody's business, frankly. And these are positive attitude, team development or team player, career role, and innovation and continuous improvement. We want people who have a good attitude at work. Surveys show this time and time again. We want people who are a team player. Surveys show this time and time again. We want people who are career focused, in the sense, when I say career focused, what I mean is that they're willing to continually grow and develop and get better at what they do and not just switch off in their learning. And we want people to bring their ideas and thoughts to work with them. Now, you might say, well, that's not a great revelation. I know that. But how many job descriptions do you know actually have those things, not just in them as bullet points at the end of the document, but actually are teased out as key performance indicators? So we need to move and shift our emphasis to performance and away from the job itself. And obviously I go into great detail about how we do all these things in my book. Now, in shift 7, we've got the move away from the job description, because the job description, we're all frustrated with the job description, because the job description actually doesn't capture everything that we're supposed to do at work. Even a really well-written one does not. Why doesn't it? Because it only focuses on one dimension of performance, and that is the job dimension. But the reality is, as I mentioned, there are non-job roles that are critically important to success. So what we need to do is to shift from a job description to a role description. And you might say, well, surely that's just semantics. I mean, isn't it the same thing? It's not, because the role description takes into account the job and non-job roles that people play. Shift number 8 is that we need to move from a job design, which we call specification. So people actually have a very tight set of tasks that they're expected to perform in their job. The problem that creates, I mean, let's talk about the advantages first. The advantage of that is that it gives people a clear train track to run on. They know what's expected of themselves. All well and good. But the problem that creates is it gives that person blinkers. So they aren't interested in anything else other than, the dot points around what they're supposed to do. And this causes problems, because most communication problems that occur in organizations is because people aren't looking beyond their own patch. And so I believe we should be looking at job redesign. And specifically what we should be looking at is job crafting. Job crafting is the notion that we should be continually changing and evolving our job design to accommodate our strengths and innate talents. And I've very rarely seen an organization that's done this well. So in shift number 9, we need to move from competition to partnership. What am I talking about there? I'm specifically talking about our relationship with AI. For many, many years, we've seen AI as a threat to our job. In other words, AI can come in and replace our jobs. Now, we're not going to stop AI. It's going to continue at an increasing acceleration. But what we need to do is to just get into partnership with AI, and we need to be able to work effectively and not just see is this a human job or is it a smart machine job? We need to get into partnership, and the big buzz term now is super teams. Super teams are teams that work together in collaboration with AI to produce great results. And I talk about that extensively in a chapter in the book. So that's the development phase that people go through. And in the reward phase, people, of course, in shift number 10, they actually are, most people are still very much promoted on the basis of their technical know-how. Still, even now in 2022. And yet, because someone's a good engineer, doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good leader. And unfortunately, because you're the best engineer, you often become the leader. And of course, it's a completely different skill set, isn't it? So we've really got to promote in our organizations the people leadership aspect of what we do, because ultimately it is good to have some technical know-how, obviously, but we shouldn't just accept that that is the prerequisite for any leadership job. That's where the problems arise. And then in shift number 11, we need to walk away from the appraisal and move towards developing performance. And, you know, a lot of organizations understanding this now, getting rid of their performance review. Shift number 12 is, you know, instead of using, you know, intrinsic rewards and punishment, which organizations still enjoy the carrot and the stick, we need to move towards human spirit and work, which is ultimately about engaging people. There's a lot of nonsense that's written out there about engagement, and we just have to start thinking differently about this. We need engaged people in the workplace, and it is very possible to achieve that, but not with the current thinking around rewards and punishment. And then the final one before we wrap up today is very much around, let's stop moving away from the idea that we have an exit interview, we say goodbye to the employee, and that's the end of it. We actually need to build alliances and networks with our people leaving, because there may be short-term project opportunities where we can call upon those people again. And so a wise organization builds alumni. They build organizational connections with people who have previously worked there as a rich pool of resources for the organization when in need. So we need to be a bit more systemized in how we do that. So folks, there are the 13 shifts. Obviously, you can read more about it in my book. And I just will mention to you that next week, we have another one of these sessions. They're always on a Friday, always at this time. And I'm going to look at the 5 conversations framework, which is a really powerful alternative to the performance review. And I'm going to share with you how it works and go into it some detail, which you'll notice is one of the shifts that's required in an organization. There's the link at the bottom. All you've got to do is click on that link like you did today, and it'll take you in to, and you'll be registered and away you go. Finally, as I said, there's a special offer I've got just to wrap up. My book, The Future of Human Resources, Unlocking Human Potential, is now available on Amazon for $46 plus postage. And I'm offering you a price today for $27 plus postage. And if you want to take an opportunity to purchase a book at that price, just send me an email by the close of business today, and I can assure you I'll set that up for you and sign the book for you, and I'll send it out at a significant discount. So if you're interested, please do so. You are more than welcome to contact me. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that feedback. I appreciate that very much. Okay, I'll just close out. Sorry, I've just got some silly message that's come up here, which I have no idea what. There we go, get rid of that. All right, so thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that feedback. All the very best for the weekend, and hopefully I see you back here next Friday. And as I said, if you're interested in the book, just shoot me an email and I'll sort that out for you. All the best, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Catch you next Friday. Thank you and goodbye.